You have no idea how much staff time was spent trying to teach me how to lead that cheer. And it just never really worked out, okay? So thank you to Julie Jolivet for becoming, being the pro that she is in that regard. I hope you had fun. You should have seen the 9 o'clock. I don't think those people have ever done a cheer in worship, okay? So, it was a high wire act this morning. It was great. We've had just a ball around here. Grace and peace to each one of you this day in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Before we even get into the actual text, I want to share 3 pieces of correspondence that came to me by various means, Facebook and internet and email. And they're just examples that I think help set up the point today here a little bit. The first is from a young woman named Katie. I knew her as Katie Thomas. She's since been married. She and her sister Kelly were 2 of our youth group in Illinois. I worked with them for 10 years. And Kelly and Katie were just wonderful, but they were the loudest, most exuberant, unguided, heat-seeking missiles I've ever seen in my life, okay? And they were big, strong girls, and they have since. Now, one of my regrets about leaving Illinois was that the kids that I worked with so much there have all gotten married and their lives have moved on, and I thought I would be a part of that when I was there, and it was really hard for me to say goodbye to these folks. But thanks to the kind of miracle of Facebook and social networking, they have allowed me back in as a friend, and I've been able to see them, and Katie and Kelly are both moms, and much to my just ironic sense of humor, they both have become school teachers. And I remember what they were like, and wow, okay? That's payback for you, if ever, if I've ever seen it. But she wrote this the other day. She's doing 30 days of gratitude this Thanksgiving, as she leads up to Thanksgiving. And she just posted this one day. I am thankful both to my parents and my childhood pastor, Dan Poffenberger, for instilling in me a strong faith in God and in people, for teaching me about a God filled with unwavering love, acceptance of all people, a God who pushes us to persevere and overcome the trials and tribulations of life because God knows we can and we will with God's help. Without their unwavering love and support, I would not have the experiences I did where I learned about community and being a selfless servant to those who need it most, where I learned to love and accept everyone. I remember her most for being on a missions trip out to an Indian reservation out in Montana. And we had an afternoon free, and we went to a rodeo. And she came running up to me and stuck a piece of paper underneath my nose and handed me a pen and said, "Sign this, Pastor Dan." And I signed it, and then she ran off, and I was asking her sister what I had just signed. And she said, oh, it was a release form for the Bucking Bronco event that she was entering. Yeah, that was my life. I thought, can't wait to call the Thomases and tell her she just broke her neck. And anyway, you don't often get a memo back from the past like that says thanks. I got an email, we all did here, those of us who work for Confirmation. We have 30-some small groups in Confirmation this year, and they all have a missional heartbeat. And this is unsolicited, and this was their own thought, and I got this email. Joel Lombard's 8th grade group is organizing a winter coat, gloves, mittens, and hats drive. The items will be distributed through our partnership with Bethlehem Lutheran Church in the Midway in St. Paul. The plan is for their group to announce next Wednesday, November 14th, with the idea of a challenge of 7th, 8th, and 9th grade groups. I don't do this to solicit this at all, but just to tell you how grateful I am that that's the news I get about our Confirmation students, and it happens over and over and over again. They want to give themselves away to the world in a really powerful way. I don't think I was there when I was in 7th grade or 8th grade or 9th grade. Then there's a young man named Zachariah Kasava, who many of you have met through Tanzania. He is our just ever-present companion there. He grew up in the little village of Matasi. We first met him when we were doing our initial trips there to get to know the congregation and the Lutherans in Matasi, as well as help them develop a water project of wells and clean water that now service 4,500 people in this village. And I met Zachariah one day as I was walking along. His pastor came up alongside of me. Her name was Pastor Joy, Pastor Upendo in Swahili. And she handed me a letter that said there was a letter of acceptance to Zachariah to the university at Tumaini. He had been one of our scholarship students through secondary school. And she said, Zachariah has been the church secretary here. He's living back in the village because he's an orphan, and he can't afford to go to the university. Can you help us? And through my family personally, as well as a few others here, Zechariah achieved his bachelor's degree from Tumaini, and then a master's in human relations. 1% of all people in Tanzania have that level of education. And he wrote me this note. Dan, I hope you and your family are doing great in the United States. You're always on my mind. My heart is always telling me you are doing great and everybody in your household is fine. I feel so happy and blessed, a happy and blessed person to share the happiness and blessings I have today. I have just reported to my new job with Compassion International as an executive officer. It was like a dream when the church on Sunday made an announcement in front of hundreds of people attending church yesterday. And I feel so blessed to be a part of these children's lives. Caring and finding to be a part of their life is a blessing to me that must declare that God has a reason for me to be here. I will go to the job training in Arusha for a month and then back to my job. I'm sending lots of thanks to Trinity Church and all friends who've been part of my success, of any of success in my life. God knew that God needed to send me somewhere to work for my community. God has done it, and I still believe God has more yet to come. I will be happy if you can share this joy and success I've had with the church. I will be taking care of 272 children who have no parents, those who have been abandoned by their parents, and those who have been infected with HIV. Thank you for being a part of my life. Asante Sana, your best friend, Zechariah. How do we get so lucky to be used by God in such powerful ways? And I share these three just because they happen to be the three that came around this week. But they come every week. And I know they come to you as well. And sometimes we don't stop often enough to say thank you. I want to share the lesson with you for today. And I want you to read it with me, okay? From the Gospel of Matthew, if you would read this out loud with me. For where your heart is, there your treasure will be also. These are words of Jesus. It's part of a teaching he has. And it's a romantic view of life, isn't it? That wherever your heart happens to lead you, that's where your treasure will go, okay? Most of us remember this, being taught this way, but it's actually wrong. This isn't what Jesus said, okay? This is actually the opposite of what Jesus said. But I wanted to put it up there because I think this is the way most of us feel about things. This kind of romantic view that just wherever our heart kind of leads us, our treasure will follow it there. But this is the real lesson, and I'd like you to read it with me. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consume, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So read that last line with me if you would again. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Jesus in this lesson was extremely pragmatic about money and treasure. That we need to be careful about where we put it because our heart is soon to follow. Unfortunately, we just don't always remember it that way. Now, I'm going to get to the punchline here, and the punchline's pretty simple, and it's one thought. But I'm going to give you a number of little things. I loved it when magazines started coming up with sidebars and little data points. I found those always more interesting than I did usually the whole body of the text. Well, this sermon has a lot of little sidebars before we get to the real body here, okay? First of all, Jesus talked about money more than anything else. You go through the New Testament, it's clear and it's absolute. Jesus didn't do that because I think that Jesus or God is preoccupied with money. I think Jesus did that because we're preoccupied with money and with things. And things haven't changed. He was speaking to a culture that was primarily a culture of scarcity. We live in a culture of abundance, and I'm not sure that it's any different today than it was then. Secondly, you can't be agnostic when it comes to your money if you're a believer when it comes to your faith. Okay? Think about it this way. If you believe that God has given you everything you have, all your relationships, all your opportunities, your mind, your intelligence, your creativity, that somehow even the things you earn and the things you consider yours, your possessions, are a direct relationship of God's abundance and provision for you. If you believe that, and secondly, if you believe that every matter of your life matters to God, that every possible interaction you have with a person every possible decision you make in life is a reflection of your faith and an opportunity to express God's light and hope and love in this world, then you can't be agnostic with regard to your money. You can't pretend that it doesn't have something to do with faith. I think the simple lesson that Jesus is teaching us here is it has everything to do with faith. And that's kind of the third point here to start off with, is that your relationship with money is a spiritual matter, period. We've kind of walled that off at the church and said, we shouldn't talk about money. But that just makes no sense. Okay? If I were to stand up here and say that your relationship with alcohol is a spiritual matter, most of us would probably go, yeah, I get that. If I were to say your relationships with people is a spiritual matter, you'd say, yes, I absolutely get that. So too, our relationship with money can be healthy or unhealthy. It can be faithful or not. So it is a spiritual matter. It's an expression of who we are and how we live. Another thing. We have found, pastorally here as a staff, as we talk about this, that this is the single biggest issue between couples, between partners. We have time and time again stories of a husband or a wife saying to us, I can't talk to my spouse about this. I can't talk to my partner about this. Money is the thing that we can't talk about. If pastors and preachers and evangelists are meant to set us free, if we are to preach the good news of a gospel that liberates us from the things that put us into bondage, then in this culture, at this moment in time, I think the single biggest thing that puts most of us in knots and limits our freedom and limits our joy, it's money. And so I think it's absolutely a matter to talk about in church. Your relationship with money, my relationship with money is a spiritual matter. And I know my relationship with money isn't always healthy and hasn't always been healthy, and that I've had to grow. And I have a lot more growing to do. A healthy relationship with money, on the other hand, that's congruent with our faith, that allows us to use everything we have to follow Jesus in the world, is a source of fulfillment and joy. So it's worth talking about. And Jesus was very pragmatic in this regard. He was not romantic. He said, wherever you put your treasure, be careful, because your heart's going to follow you there, period. Now, I want to tell you a few stories today. The first has to do with an organization called Valley Outreach. How many of you are familiar with Valley Outreach or have worked? Good. I don't have to do a lot of conversation about this. Valley Outreach is our local community's backstop. They take care of us when we fall down or when life whacks us over the head. Years ago here at Trinity, we would have a constant stream of people coming to our office asking us if we could help when their heat was about to be turned off or when they couldn't pay their rent. And the churches got together as well as with community leaders, and Valley Outreach was born, and it is our emergency services. If you were to come here and say, this winter, we can't pay our heating bill, we've lost a job, something's happened, we've been ill, that's where we go. And over the course of this past year in 2012, 340 families here in the Valley got relief from Valley Outreach. Their heat bill was paid, their mortgage was sustained because of what we do together. Over 2,000 people in 2012, adults and children, used the family closet associated with Valley Outreach. It is the most beautiful place. Our Helping Hands guys have helped repaint it. Several of you leaders in the family closet. It is a place of pride and dignity where people can come and find a warm coat, find a set of clothes suitable for their children to go to school in, can find a suit so they can go to an interview. It's a beautiful place, and we do that together. Last week I walked into church one morning, and one of you was standing outside, and we had this little exchange, and I don't remember what exactly she said, but she said something like this: if it weren't for faith, and if it weren't for church, and if it weren't for my friends, I would be in a, quote, existential place of despair. That this has given me hope and life, and I'm so grateful. Over the course of the last couple months, our missions director, Tom Thietz, was approached by a group called Unseen Angels in the Olson family here, some of our confirmation leaders, with kind of an audacious idea to feed 5,000 people this Thanksgiving. And Tom said yes. And I don't believe we're financially underwriting that as much as we're providing a lot of energy, connections, relationships. For instance, Kowalski's has been giving us both a grant and low-cost turkey so we can do this. Well, not only, Tom just told me yesterday, not only are we feeding 5,000, it's actually grown to 7,200 people on Thanksgiving. 7,200 people on Thanksgiving. 65 different towns in 15 different counties. It stretches from north of Osceola to south of River Falls, from east of Baldwin, Wisconsin, all the way into Minneapolis. Many of you are driving, preparing, sending meals, delivering meals. We have partner congregations like Central Lutheran in Minneapolis and First Lutheran, Chris Berthelson's church in St. Paul, East Emmanuel, and Bethlehem in the Midway, Pastor Joy's church that we are in relationship with already. A couple of those places Tom has called and asked, if we have meals for you, can you use them? And I think at least once, if not twice, Tom got just this stunned silence on the other end of the line as the volunteer was saying, we had already made a commitment to serve people a meal, and we had no idea where the food was coming from. And then the pastor would call up a little later and say, is this a prank, or are you serious? Okay? Totally stunned. Back to Tanzania, in Matasi over time, we have helped them build a water system for themselves that has clean water instead of surface water. They have taps that are nearby their homes instead of walking down into the valley to collect muddy, bacteria-filled water. 4,500 people, and we were a part of that. That happens every day. The things you and I take for granted are now something they can take more for granted than ever in their life, that they can get up in the morning and not spend their women and children half their day collecting such a simple thing as clean water. We have scholarshiped over 200 children from that village into secondary school at Boma Lagombe. And at that secondary school, and I've asked Tom to make a presentation to the whole congregation of what's happened to that campus. When we first encountered them, there was 200 students in shacks that they had built by hand, and they called themselves a secondary school. And over time, we have created almost a state-of-the-art for Tanzania secondary school that now has a population of over 400 and receives some of the highest marks in all of Tanzania, a place that does not guarantee secondary school education for their children. So the Lutheran Church in Tanzania, by the way, there are more Lutherans in Tanzania than there are in Minnesota, fastest growing Lutheran church kind of in the world. In 30 years of doing Mexico mission, which we are now ramping up for our, is it 30 years, Tom? Is it 20-something, somewhere in there? I would guess, just by my own math, we've sent at least 2,000 people over time to Mexico to put roofs on people's homes. These people who save for 5 or 10 years, cinder block, they build the walls, they tend the floors, and they wait for us to come. I think over 400 homes have been finished and people have a place to live. And as they finish those homes are blessed in partnership with them and us. Blankets are given them as a visible reminder of God's presence. 30 years. And if there were 4,000 students, that tells me that over 3,000 of our homes have been blessed by these returning missionaries whose lives have gotten much bigger, whose hearts have grown, whose sense of calling in this world has grown. In fact, between services, Leah Ranta, her father came up to me. They're not even members of this church. She came on this mission trip because her friends invited her. She's now a student at St. Kate's or St. Ben's. And her dad just came to tell me a story. He waited by the coffee until I was free from all the other conversations to tell me that Leah just changed her major. And she's now getting a business major in college, but she went to her dean of the business school and said, I don't want to work for corporate America. My vision is to work for an NGO somewhere in this world, to do good in this world. Can I receive that education here? And he said yes, and he invited her to a lecture that just happened to be happening, I think, in the next week with 3 heads of NGOs that were on campus. And she got to listen to that, and from out of that came an invitation to go serve a semester abroad, to learn from one of these NGOs. And then that happens over and over again. We grow these missionaries not just for a week in Mexico, but for a lifetime. Okay. I have this relationship. Wow, I'm really long. We're really in trouble with time. I've got so much more I want to say to you. On Wednesday nights here, we have over 210 children here, 180 confirmation students. We have 33 small groups in children's ministry, 31 in confirmation. They're everywhere in this building. We feed them with pizza, their families, over 200 now, every Wednesday night. We have 3 choirs. We've got 40 to 50 senior high kids, all of them. This happens every Wednesday. We were talking, we drive home full up on Wednesday. Siri teaches 9th grade. I teach 7th grade. In 7th grade, we teach them the biblical narrative of God, what God has done in this world. In 7th grade, or in 8th grade, we teach them their unique design and how God has created them individually in this world to be a light and a joy and a love. And finally, in 9th grade, we teach them how to be theologians and invite them into a lifelong theological reflection on the sacred life they've been given. It's a beautiful thing. And I could go on and on and on and on. I want to tell you in closing, though, a story about a guy named Doug. And when I lived in Walnut Grove, Minnesota, Little House on the Prairie, Walnut Grove in Minnesota, that's the same place. That's where I was first a pastor. It was a lovely place. Doug was the richest guy in town, the richest guy in the county. He owned outright by cash 16 sections of land, which in that day and age was a big deal. He had no heirs. He died without a will. There was a moment in Doug's life where he was arrested and given a misdemeanor because he was stealing fried chicken from the local buffet. His whole life was about accumulation. None of it was about giving it away. It made me very sad that I had no further impact on Doug's life and couldn't invite him into a relationship of stewarding all those things for the benefit of organizations, the church, the community, where they might have done good. Let that not be our story. It's easy to pick on somebody like him who has such vast resources, but it's also true of us who have much more limited resources. To see our lives as a place of abundance, okay, that we can give away. Let us choose wisely where we place our treasure, because our hearts will follow there. And it is a spiritual question, and one that we need to take seriously. And if we live lives of stewarding God's abundance with gratitude and joy, we unlock the secret to life, I believe. Because those stories I started with and the stories I've just shared with you today, they're all of our stories. And they're the things they're going to talk about someday when we're not here anymore. They're not going to talk about the accumulations we made and the vast sum that we saved for ourselves. They're going to talk about how we were good stewards. May it be true of you and me. In Jesus' name, amen.